Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking at this camera right now. So yes, I am looking at you. But when a conversation is starting, I'm going to move this side and then I'm going to speak to Cherith. So don't feel weird out because I am not constantly looking at you like this. I'm going to look at Cherith and Cherith is gonna respond like this. Cherith, would you just wave to the camera? Yes, nice. So with me, I have Cherith Sanger, and she is someone who is operating in the legal realms of sex work. Now, recently there have been quite interesting developments within that particular sector. And to put context to you, the audience, is that we got news from Elon Musk that his platforms is going to create an AI type of girlfriend. Now we know about the sex robot, and then you have the analog version of that, which is the sex doll. So, ladies and gentlemen, this conversation is about this, but on a more serious note, what I am looking at is potential sexual offenses and how it affects the sex work industry. Now, Cherith have been in that space for some time. Cherith, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so Cherith, I'm going to jump right into the conversation. Um, you've seen this, and we had kind of a discussion about
Yeah.
this already. What do you think that this AI girlfriend that Elon Musk is busy with, uh, how would it affect the sex industry in the coming years?
Firstly, are there going to be AI boyfriends as well? That's what I would like to know. Is it only AI girlfriends? What about AI boyfriends?
So what I saw is that AI girlfriend, but let's put it more differently than AI partners.
AI partners, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of its possible impact on the sex industry, so there are always going to be sex workers. So what I see as the difference between what you're talking about around AI sexual partners, in fact, right? I mean, it can also provide possibly other types of partnership benefits, companionship, etc., etc. But there's a physical element that comes with sex work. And the term sex work can be very broadly interpreted. There are different definitions of it. So it really also depends on what we are seeing sex work as in terms of our conversation. So for some people, or in some context, or depending on how we're writing about sex work, talking about sex work, the kind of work that we're doing, some people may have a very limited definition of sex work as the sex worker who is standing on a street corner selling a sexual service, or as a sex worker working in a brothel selling a sexual service. There's another argument also, or there's a different way of looking at a broader definition of sex work, which then also includes, for example, pornography, exotic dancing, that type of thing, possibly even also OnlyFans, for example. So it's very definitional, okay? But in terms of, these could be arguments outside of the law. In terms of the legal definition, it's about providing a sexual service, providing a sexual service to B, and it's very much targeting the actual physical interaction. So I think it's just important that we understand because what type of sex work are we talking about.
So what you then saying is that it might not have any impact.
So I think it really does depend. Firstly, who can afford robotic sex dolls or whatever? I think the analog ones are more accessible, but who can really afford robotic sex dolls? I imagine it's going to be very, very expensive. And we understand that, for instance, the South African context, most people may not be able to afford it, perhaps middle class, if you want to call it even upper middle class up and upward. Sex services are used or purchased by across classes, so working class, and it goes up in different, it's across classes. There are not specific classes who use sex services only. My point is, for me, there is a physical element that goes with human interaction, that goes with human touch, that is different. That is where I'm at, and I mean, I'm also still thinking about these things. These are new areas. But I think if it's going to affect the sex industry, it's going to have a limited impact with only certain people, members, or certain levels of or categories of the population. There's always going to be, in my view, a client or a demand for the sex that is sold on a street corner and for the sex that is sold in brothel. And look, sometimes, sex workers are not only engaging in sexual, providing sexual services. Sometimes a client comes and it is just for companionship, as a date for the night to an event or whatever the case may be. But yeah, we're talking about sex here. I'm sure AI dolls or whatever, these robotic dolls, are also going to be able to provide other sorts of companionship that serve the exact needs of what the person wants also, But yeah, there is still going to be a need related to human touch, human contact, I believe. Yeah, that's where I'm at with that. And affordability of having access to this, Jacob. I think that is very, very questionable about who is really going to have access to it. How's it going to change our lives in South Africa?
So just a point on this. What Elon Musk came out with is an anime character that you can access via your cell phone or stuff like that. So it's literally IP that you create yourself, a type of fantasy girlfriend or sexual partner, whatever iteration it is, boyfriend, and then you can have this as your go-to companion. Let me put it like that. Now, is sex always physical, or is there different elements to it? And which parts of the sex industry does this new type of service really cater for? So that's what I'm thinking. Knowing that this can be accessed via phone or device, could that potentially, it's not just the robot, but
not only the robot,
just this anime character that you create, would that in any way affect the industry?
Okay, so the AI purely that you can access on your phone or on a computer is something very different from the robotic doll that has AI infused with it or injected in it. So the AI accessible on a phone, I think that can have an impact on the sex work industry, if you want to call it that, in terms of services being provided to people kind of through, telephone sex or online chats. There's a lot of that happening. OnlyFans, all these kind of live interactions in real time that people have. Certainly, I believe that can have an impact on sex services, on the sex work industry, if we're defining it to include that. For sure it can. Because so the risk especially is about how this AI can be tailored to the specific needs of what people really want, needs and desires, right? And it's easier access. It's not, and also cheaper, which becomes an issue as well, because you're able to access it as you want to, when you want to, perhaps without bookings, the AI that you want in that particular moment. All of those types of factors, I think, play a role. So I do think it's going to impact sex workers, or in terms of how we're defining it now, in terms of the services and the money that they are making of providing these services, because it's another platform that is now being provided. Some people will always, Jacob, prefer the kind of real person voice. I think that, maybe I'm a little bit conservative with this AI stuff, but I think that there will be limitations, and more of those will be exposed, because the AIs are also developing. There's something about human conversation. There's something about interactions between two humans that will always be different. I feel there will always be limitations. This is in my view with AI, because it's not natural, it's not organic, it's not evolving without our intervention still. There will always, I think, have to be some human intervention of taking it further. I don't believe it can entirely replace it, but for the purposes of companionship, of conversation, of people receiving some sort of, so when I think of love and affection, which is inherent in intimate relationships, not like now platonic, intimate relationships, you know, some of that can, I suppose, be verbal through this AI, and your emotional needs can be served. The type of sexual needs that are served, that's something else. Romantic needs can be served. But yeah, I think it can serve some of those purposes, but not in its entirety, you know.
Okay. I want to get into the space. So there is a possibility, as you have pointed out, that this might affect the industry. I want to get more to the person in terms of the law and what is some of the consequences that might be that we might breach. So I think one of the biggest things that currently is on my mind is having a secret AI partner.
Yes.
This is cheating on your human partner. And I'll explain how that ties into the law later in this conversation.
Yeah, so I really think that it depends on the two parties involved, and it depends on what type of agreement they have, you know, what the kind of terms are of the relationship, because all relationships differ. Relationships between two people, romantic relationships or intimate relationships, are based on what they want it to be. And people have different kind of non-negotiables or different, you know, aspects of that works for them. So it really does depend on what the parties in that relationship, or the spouses, even if it is in a marriage, what they find acceptable and acceptable in that particular relationship or marriage, you know. So I think that I could see potential problems with AI interference in the relationship between two people, you know. So if the AI is serving some emotional kind of needs, or possibly some sexual needs for one of the parties to the exclusion of the other one, and that other party who's using or relying on the AI is needing less of that, or requiring or giving less love and affection to the other partner, or needing less of it from them, that could really interfere with that human relationship that they have with each other. And I can certainly see how then it can be seen as emotional cheating, for some people also sexually cheating as well, if there's this type of relationship existing with an AI. You know, some people will probably also, Jacob, say, but is that even a real relationship if it's an artificial one? But we'll see, even with the courts now and where society is going, that artificial is also becoming something that's recognized in so many ways, you know. In terms of, I mean, for example, the cybercrimes legislation now, the 2020 Act, talks about, uses the term artificial or fictitious, or, you know, something being created that is not really real, but that can have the impact of something that is real. And I think that that's where the issue comes in. If this AI, for example, can have the impact of, or provide part of the needs of that intimate relationships can, then it means it actually is really then simulating something that is real. And I believe it can affect relationships then, yes.
So if it possibly can affect relationships in the future, my question then with regards to that is, if it may affect the relationship, could this be a possible argument in a divorce court or a type of settlement? Because now the law gets involved in the interpretation of cheating. So how do you, and I know this might be far-reaching, but it's one of the things you have to consider. If one person is affected by the secret and you come across it, can this be possibly grounds for separation?
That's an excellent question, and I believe, yes, that it can. So years ago, in previous laws dealt with specifically proving that somebody is cheating, for example. So cheating now, however, would just be one of the grounds of irretrievable breakdown of a marriage, that there's no prospect of the partners coming back together and restoring the relationship to what it would have been or what it was previously. So what sort of damage has been caused, that there's loss of love and affection between the parties. So certainly, and you said something important, it is about the effect or impact that one of the parties or spouses are having with the AI on this marriage, And if there is an impact and one of the parties are no longer happy and it's affected the relationship to such an extent where there is, for example, no intimacy, there's no love, there's no affection, then yes, it contributes to an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. And those are grounds for divorce in our courts. So I will not be surprised to see more and more of these types of cases coming before the court, or that as grounds of divorce, I don't know of any case law at the moment, but there may even be some that have been decided along similar lines. I'm sure there's been somebody who's gone to court and said, you know what, there's no communication between us, there's no love and affection because he's spending most of his time watching pornography, or she's spending most of the time watching pornography. So there's no affection between us, or on their cell phone looking at pictures of people on Instagram or on OnlyFans or whatever. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be surprised if that's come forward. So definitely where I see us going to in terms of what's going to be put before the courts for judicial officers to decide and consider, we're going to see more and more of this kind of AI stuff coming out.
All right. Now, there's also a possible criminal element to this type of creation. So one of the questions that I was pondering on is hacking someone's AI girlfriend a cybercrime or is it theft? Because we'll first discuss the fictitious character that is created online, like the enemy character. Is this a cybercrime?
Hacking.
Where does it fit in the realm of laws? In which crime are you actually breaking when you hack someone's?
So the Cybercrimes Act, which is quite a new act, 2020, it's about 5 years old, the 2019 Act, the 2020 Act came into operation from my understanding. What I think is, Jacob, that yes, based on what the Act says, the provisions of the Act talk about unlawful access, unlawful interception or interference, for example, with something that has like AI. So I think that yes, that is what the issue would be, or what the relevant crime would be. There's a range of crimes that are set out in the Cybercrimes Act. It's a very, very extensive list of what would be classified as a crime. What's also interesting, this is very, very interesting, and I'll say that in the Cybercrimes Act, the common law definition of theft has basically been extended or expanded. And I'll explain this. So I don't think that in this example that would be considered theft in terms of the Cybercrimes Act. I think it would be related to one of the other offences such as unlawful access or interception or interference or adapting something, relating to something of that, something to that, in that sense, right? But in terms of theft, what you're talking about, I don't really see it as meeting or satisfying the definition of theft. So the expansion or extending the definition of theft is now that it can also apply to an incorporeal object, right? So previously, if you look at the common law, the definition of theft would be about dispossessing somebody, without somebody's permission or consent, taking a thing, property, and it would it would be corporeal property. So by that I mean something that you can touch, something that is tangible. But now Cybercrimes Act has extended it to intangible objects or things or property. So for example, anything that is created online, something that is not tangible, is now also covered in terms of the cybercrimes definition. And that's something that it's quite a big development of the law, but obviously it was a law that was necessary to expand on because we as humans now, and in South Africa we're actually quite behind. I think that these types of developments in the law were made prior to 2020 of having like actual legislation. But this now expands it and gives a level of protection for theft which is happening online, for example, or theft with whatever you've developed that is AI. Those types, you can take any of that would now fall under the definition of an incorporeal object. But provided that the person wants to dispossess you permanently of this particular online incorporeal property, which is yours. Of course, you always have to prove ownership. So my feeling is that ownership may be a little bit more difficult in this situation than what it is with corporeal items or property, such as a car, such as expensive jewelry. It's a little bit more difficult because online, there's also questions about who owns what, right? Like when you are using a particular platform, but you have, there are certain aspects of your AI partner that you have created. So what belongs to the company, what belongs to you? What is, those types of things come up. So ownership does become a question. So it really depends on it's a case by case basis. You need to look at all of these angles about the extent to which when you're purchasing something or using something on a particular platform, to what extent are you an owner? Is there co-ownership? What do you have the rights to? What do you not have the rights to, etc.?
So I want to think about another question. So it's a cybercrime. Let's say that we can fit it there.
Yeah.
It might fit as theft if you make a case for it, but generally it might not be.
Yeah.
Could it be a sex crime? Because there is a psychological nature to sex.
Yeah.
So if someone hacks someone else's AI creation and have sex with that, even if it's imaginary or online, would that then be considered as a sex crime? Or can you even take it to the court, or have we start thinking about developing laws or think about this in the South African context?
I'm sure that such a case
Why are you laughing?
has been taken in the US already because, there's a lot of suing going on over there. More than a year, but yeah.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah. Okay. I'm laughing because you're asking whether it is a sex crime.
Yes.
So sex crime towards who? The person who owns this AI, who created it. Like me having a relationship with my AI partner, right? Or now you're talking about a thing. Now you come in and you have sex with my AI. And now you're talking about me. What recourse do I have? Is that what you're asking? What legal recourse do I have?
Yes.
Okay.
After a sexual act is committed.
After a sexual act, but now this sexual act is nothing physical, because this is not the robot we're talking about. This is the AI personality.
Yeah, but it's sex.
Yeah, well, it depends on, look, I say it depends. There are times, it really depends on the conversation or the context, that there are broader definitions of sex and those that are not. I mean, people can get divorced or separate in relationships because of emotional cheating. Do you know what I mean? It's not necessarily sex. It depends on what sex is. Are we only talking physical sex or sex talk? Like the same thing, I have a big thing about these definitions of context. How we're using it and for what purpose. But I know what you're saying. You're saying now that this can be sex, that you came in and you had sex, you cheated with my AI girlfriend, boyfriend. Not cheated, you never...
No, it's a forceful act.
Forceful?
No,
Hi.
Wait, you hacked someone's AI property.
Mm-hmm.
Then you, without their consent, had sex
with the AI.
With that AI.
Without the AI's consent, or without the person who owns that AI.
Let's deal with it as property.
Yeah, because that AI, that's what I was going to say, cannot consent.
Yeah.
And the AI, obviously, this fictitious character has no rights as a legal person. So there's no recourse. I mean, that's going to another level. Perhaps in time we'll see something like that. But an AI is property, you're very correct in law. So it's about what recourse I would have against you for hacking. And doing this, it's not. Are you trying to say that it is? You see, because it becomes very difficult here when we talk about consent, and this kind of thing. It could potentially be very problematic. You just come and interfere. You interfered with my AI, but was my AI in agreement?
No, it affects you at this level of psychology where you cannot have sex with this creation.
Because that's my creation.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but then I could think about suing you for damages or suing the person who has interfered, intercepted, unlawfully accessed my AI. So the legal recourse which I would have would be to consider instituting a damages claim. So in other words, using the law of delict as a way to sue for the harm that I've suffered, because I'm now feeling aggrieved. So what legal recourse is available to me as an aggrieved person? I can think about instituting a damages claim, where basically I am suing the person who has unlawfully accessed, interfered with, engaged in sexual conduct, whatever the case may be, right? And this has affected me because I now feel that I have been, it psychologically affected me or emotionally affected me, right? So I have to think about what I could sue for, you know? But like, remember, there would, of course, be, in terms of the Cybercrimes Act, also a way that you can, a way that you could bring criminal charges, open a case at the police station, and then to follow the criminal justice system process from there as to having somebody charged in terms of one of the provisions of the Act, right? Because it's a statutory crime. But in terms of a damages claim, I would need to have to sue for how I have been harmed, and that can always be difficult because, you see, with something like this, there are not going to be any special damages, like where I can sue for loss of a limb, for example, or I can sue for the cost of medical bills. Maybe I could sue for my psychologist fees, for my bills of my psychologist or psychiatrist, for example. Maybe that's something we could sue for. Those things are easier because they are, you can calculate them easy. They can be computed. It's like you can calculate easily what it is. It's like computation. You can do that. When it comes to general damages, it is not. And this is also difficult even in cases, for example, of rape. So you have a criminal case and somebody is, let's say, for example, convicted of rape, but then I also want to sue for damages for the harm that I've suffered as a result of that rape, you know. That type of harm, again, the general harm, for general damages, it's always more tricky to actually say, you know, what am I suing for, how much am I suing for? The courts develop that over time as well, you know, where you will see, okay, in this type of case, or if there's a similar case, I would look for a case that's somewhat of a precedent and see what they've given, how much money has been awarded. Because remember, damages claims, they are meant to be compensatory in nature, okay? It serves a compensatory, not a penal function like criminal law does. So in civil now, we need to be compensated for the harm suffered. So I think that is something that we may see in time. I'm sure in other jurisdictions outside of South Africa, there may have been cases like this. I mean, I haven't come across one. I'm not sure if the courts have decided one. I don't think so. But we may see the courts, being faced with a case being brought before the court, where they need to look at that.
So when it comes to, and I think this goes towards the last question I have. Deepfakes, AI creations, where people nowadays with AI software can create images and figures of you that looks like real person, looks like real, like you. Now, let's say hypothetically that there's two people, they're married. Doesn't matter which gender they are, but they're married. But the one partner is the victim of a cybercrime, where a deepfake character image was created of that person, and then that supposedly had sex with another fictitious character. So deepfake that you cannot tell whether it's real sex. So now the other partner came across this and think this is real in this particular case, and there's a real effect in this particular in situation on the relationship. What do you do in the case of the deepfakes, because deepfakes already exist?
Yes, I think there's two levels. There's the legal level that we can discuss, and then I think there's one again that's really between two people. you know. And I think that before I get to the legal level, I think it again depends on the nature of the relationship between the parties, or the level of trust in the relationship, let me put it that way, because we are living in a time of AI. We've seen what is possible, right? And if we know that this is a possibility, it's really going to hinge on how we trust the other person, you know, because that is just that's the only level in regard to looking at what we believe and what we don't believe in, unless of course there is a way through investigation that we can find out or see there is some sort of proof or evidence that this is a deep fake and that it is not real. Of course, that answers many questions, right? But on the level outside of the law, that is really about two parties and the level of trust. And that there's no other way in which something like that can be looked at. It depends on the parties. And it obviously depends on what's happening in the relationship at the time. There's a lot of those factors. Legally, however, they are in criminal law, and obviously there will also be in civil, you know. But firstly, in terms of criminal law, the Cyber Crimes Act is very, very clear on that deep fakes, or you know, even if it is artificial or not true, if there's any exposure of somebody nude or nude body parts, genitals, there's woman's breasts or transgender person's breasts, whether it's covered or not with clothing, that's real. In terms of it's considered to be, if that is what is put out there and what is shared, you know, that is a crime. But again, and it doesn't matter whether it's real or actually artificial. You know what I mean? The point is that there needs to be a reasonable expectation that your privacy should have been respected, or your confidentiality should have been protected, that this personal intimate images or videos or whatever should not have been shared. You should have such a reasonable expectation. And if all of those requirements are satisfied, you know, it's actually a crime. So again, through the Cyber Crimes Act, you can go to the police station, open a case, it will be investigated, charges, go to the National Prosecuting Authority, could end up in court again, you know. But there's also in terms of other acts, so the Sexual Offences Act as well, the 2007 Criminal Law Sexual Offences Related Matters Amendment Act. That act also specifically prohibits this kind of thing, you know. And I'm sure also in terms of the, Films and Publications Amendment Act, there would be, you know, there's different levels of protection is what I'm saying. Sexual Offences Act is not only that it needs to be real also, it could also be artificial. And then of course, you could also have recourse, legally speaking, also go to court. If it's somebody, if you know there's now evidence that X is the one that created that deep fake, right? I could also have recourse for what damage the person has caused to my reputation, for example, you know, or a contravention of my right to privacy, my constitutional right. There's many different legal avenues that can be explored.
All right. A final question to wrap up the conversation. So, what came clear from this conversation for me is that there is potential.
Stay away from my eyes.
There is potential loopholes in the South African law. And unfortunately, the South African criminal justice system is set out in such a way that poor people are not afforded justice. So a poor person who created an AI partner, online partner, who is being hacked, would not get justice and recourse the same way as a person who can afford it, go to a lawyer and do something about it. The same is with someone who experienced revenge
porn, that's also cybercrime.
Revenge porn, but this time a deep fake. Someone created a deep fake, and they don't have the cost and the legal means to actually do something about it and to prove it, because this is quite costly. And then the marginalized society also doesn't have the monies for the psychological treatments, the counseling, dealing with a potential break in relationship because of a deep fake. So there is loopholes currently
Yeah.
in our law when it comes to AI. My question to you then is, what should we do in South Africa? Because AI, artificial intelligence, is not going away. It's infiltrating more and more spheres of our lives, especially now with the personal and creating artificial partners. What should we do in South Africa
Yeah.
to patch some of these loopholes?
I'm also actually very concerned that deep fakes are now going to be used as an excuse or now misused by people who are genuinely cheating. That's another consideration. Everything is now going to be a deep fake to protect. People are going to use it to protect themselves when they are being unfaithful in their marriages and their relationships. This is for people who choose, who choose to be in those types of arrangements with people. I mean, I don't want to sit here being the model about. That's not what I'm trying to say, talking from a morality perspective of who's cheating, who's not, why they're cheating, what they're doing. I am not questioning how people choose. South Africans are choosing to live in many, many different ways, in polyamorous ways, polygyny is happening, and are caught through Muslim marriages, men are allowed to have more than one partner. There are all of these different things. I mean, personally, obviously, I have my views around equality and gender equality, in particular in those arrangements, but then there's women also who are involved in polyamorous arrangements more and more. Nonetheless, so my point is, I don't want to take a moralistic high ground on any of that. That's not what my intention is. But I'm talking about when the other party, where people agree to having, where people agree to have what you call like one-on-one, like just one man and one woman. I'm forgetting the word even because I'm using the word polyamory more nowadays. What's the opposite of polyamory? Monogamy. I forgot. This is a good thing. That means I'm questioning. That's so normalized. But my point is, like, there are people who choose to have monogamous relationships. And if that are the arrangements between people, I'm all about people being able to trust and for their needs and what they wants and desires in relationships with each other. Essentially, though, that's a contract in a way. Not legally speaking, a marriage is something of its own kind. But what I mean is it's actually a contract between two people, right? It's a contract in a way. An emotional one, a psychological one, a romantic, whatever. Not something that you're taking to court. There's other aspects when you're owning property together where you want to talk about who's going to inherit what when whoever dies, or that type of thing. Maintenance between people in a relationship who choose not to marry legally, where there's matrimonial property regimes that cover that. That's a different thing. I'm talking about how people decide to live their lives, which is something that was very much policed previously. There were only certain ways that were acceptable. What is now socially acceptable is starting to shift and change. We of course have people who have very, very particular religious beliefs or cultural beliefs about relationships, about sex and all of these things. That does exist, but there's also other people who are shifting and changing and doing things differently in South Africa. Times are changing. Young people are doing things differently, Anyway, I just wanted to make that point. But in terms of where we're going, yes. In terms of where we're going,
there's loopholes and
yeah.
And sometimes we need to have the foresight to do something until there's a crisis. Before there's a crisis, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
So what do we do?
Well, look, I think that in terms of the misuse of AI, in terms of dishonesty, in terms of all these different things and the different reasons, including psychological reasons that people may be doing things like hacking, misusing things, whatever the case may be, with a view to harming others sometimes. My point is that it's got a lot to do with, it's a human thing for me. And what's happening, why do we have people engaging in any harmful conduct? Because I'm thinking about how the harm that this can cause, breaking down people's marriages and relationships, causing psychological harm or emotional harm, because some people may receive it like that, or experience it like that. This has got nothing, it's not about the law, it's about human behavior for me. It's about why people engage in this sort of conduct that could be harm-causing. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I think that it's got a lot to do with that. So my work or how I often think about things like this is more about, so something wrong, I've been aggrieved, something bad has happened to V. What can we do to somewhat compensate V or try to put V in the closest possible position to what V was in prior to this harm-causing event or incident, That's kind of the realm that I operate in more. And your point around access, the truth is, I think we know that even poor people in South Africa are using cell phones, have data, have access to the internet. And we know that, I also don't know if legal aid is going to be representing the poor in issues like this, because they don't really do damages claims legal aid. South Africa, as universities would be a bit reluctant for this type of issue. Anything that's psychological, mental, or emotional, Jacob, people are not really going to put as much resources in. We see this in all different aspects when it comes to anything emotional or psychological. The focus is often not there. We still in South Africa and other parts of the world talk about violence and harm very much only in terms of physical and sexual violence, where it's physical, physical. Somebody's physically harmed. That seems to be more acceptable, where more resources will be pushed towards that, and that's not even enough. So my point to you is that when it comes to this kind of psychological suffering, the poor will suffer more. But I also want to say, the missing middle will also be significantly affected. They may have more money to buy data, they may have fiber in their homes, and they still can't go to a lawyer because legal aid's not going to assist them because they're not considered indigent and won't pass the means test. And the means test is getting higher and higher to accommodate for, the standard of living in South Africa. But the point is, they can't go that route to legal aid. They can't get a free pro bono lawyer, in other words. And they also can't go to the private sector lawyer who's going to charge them per hour in their glory, basically. So there's also something specific there, because they may be the group that's accessing AI and using these things that we're talking about even more and to a great extent. And this leaves this group unprotected of protection again, I think we also need to look at what are some of the safety measures, and this would be for the IT people, the programmers. What can be introduced to better protect people's access? Or to basically prevent unlawful access and interception of this kind of online or this kind of data or AI or info, whatever it is. What can be introduced on that level to better protect people, Because, there are always going to be people doing crazy things.
Cherith, I think we need to have a follow-up conversation with this. Because there is a duty on legal practitioners, universities, the criminal justice system, the courts, every part, to start thinking about developing law and protect people and their rights.
Yes.
Because there is potential right breaches.
Yes.
From our conversation right here, we can see there is potential constitutional rights that we might breach. So if that's the case, then we need to start thinking about how do we prevent future breaches. So maybe next time we have the conversation, there might be some possible
developments.
And some of these things have happened that we talked on Abrasive Conversations.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining.
Thank you very much. You've made me think about things that I would not have thought about. I mean, I don't spend my time thinking about sex dolls, even though I do legal work in the area of sex work. I've never really thought of sex dolls. I think I've seen them at the sex shops out of interest to go investigate, but I haven't thought about this becoming something. But AIs I know about. And there's just one last thing I want to say. What responsibility? So the people who have created these online tools to create AIs, I've seen a couple of cases or heard about cases where teenagers in particular become attached to AIs and struggle with, for example, the AI separation from the AI, or become dependent on that AI in very unhealthy ways, which again stops them from living naturally as humans, basically, in simple terms is that. And I just want to also say in closing this about what responsibility, is there or should there be, or levels of accountability when things go ugly and wrong like this? I mean, do we say it's just a matter of opting out and not using it, or parents' responsibility to ensure that the children are using these things safely and responsibly? I also want to talk about that kind of responsibility on the people who create these tools, on the programmers and the people who are creating, making this possible. Are there enough safety checks in place for people to access it and use it in the ways they want to? I mean, I think that we need to talk about the responsibility on all the different role players.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that is Cherith Sanger. She's waving goodbye. She is, just heard, we cannot call people activists anymore, because nowadays even right-wing people are activists.
Yes.
So we must call them a revolutionary. So Cherith has been a revolutionary in the sex work industry and have been fighting for many of the realization of their rights in that particular sector. So thank you for the work he's doing. It's not usually a good space to be in, because you deal with the most marginalized in society. So that's why Cherith has this, and she has the legal knowledge that I don't have.
And everything related to sex, I've got to think about sex and the law.
No.
Sex is pleasure, sexual violence, sex work. This is it.
But just a final disclosure. There's one question I took out, and I would like you guys to join the conversation on that question, because she wasn't happy with that question. So it's about sex dolls. So and the question was, is borrowing someone's sex doll or sex robot without their consent theft, or is it a sex crime? So let me know what you think. Where do you fit? Should you borrow? Should you share? Those type of things, and where do you cross the line?
And don't forget the definition of theft.
Don't forget the definition of theft. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. This is Abrasive Conversations, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Bye.